We are getting started with the workshop AEO 101, how AI search recommends one brand over the another. This is brought to you by Verbinden and Ziply. Just a small introduction about Verbinden. Verbinden is a digital marketing agency based out of Bangalore, serving clients across the globe. Ziply is one of the most advanced technology platforms helping brands figure out in the AI search. We are collaborating together to bring in the expertise in marketing as well as the technology to share more information about AEO and GEO. So with that, we will get started. Anil, we can move to the next slide. Just before we get started, we also wanted to let you know who we are. I have the presence of Anil Jwalanna. He's based out of Detroit. He has close to 25 years of experience spanning across technology, marketing, and different domains. But it's interesting to know that he's just not been at the leadership roles. He has founded multiple companies, had multiple exits, but at the same time he's super passionate about of technology, and as a founder he has led marketing teams, understood what goes into the marketing, and that's what he brings into Ziply. I'm the moderator. I'm Vinay Kumar. I am the co-founder and CEO of Verbinden. We are a full-fledged digital marketing agency based in Bangalore. We serve clients across the globe, and one of the key goals that we have for the year 2026 and going forward is to become one of the pioneers when it comes to AI search and AI-led marketing. And that is going to be enabled by Anil and his team. With that, we're getting started. Anil, the stage is yours. I might just keep asking you a few questions. And again, we have wonderful audience here. If you have questions, do put in the chat. If it is great, I might pull it up and then ask while the webinar is on. Or else we can also have a Q&A at the end of the session. But let's make this session most interactive and interesting. Thank you everyone for joining us. Anil, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the great introduction, Vinay. And thank you all for joining the call. We are very excited to have you in this webinar, and we are very passionate, as Vinay mentioned. This is once in a lifetime type of an opportunity with AI. It is changing the business models, and it's changing the way the lead generation happens. So it's a monumental shift when it comes to how the business operates itself, whether it is a B2B company, large, small, it doesn't matter. Geography doesn't matter. So everything is up, for grab at this point in time. So with that, let me just go to the next slide. So I think everyone knows that today SEO is more or less outdated, and AI is dominantly taking over. So, and there are different terms. Different people use AEO, answer engine optimization. Some people use it as GEO, which is generative engine optimization. Some uses AI visibility. So I always use AI visibility or LLM because behind the scene there are all the LLMs or the answer engines. So, as we know, there are dominant players like ChatGPT, Gemini, or AI Overview, which is also GAI mode. Then you have Microsoft Copilot, Claude, Perplexity. And of course, the Grok and few others are also coming up as well. So, but I would consider the top 5 AI engines at this point in time. Having said that, there may be more and more new players may come in the market. So, which means that it is more and more challenging for businesses to figure out how to show up across multiple engines. And today we will kind of go deeper into understanding what really drives these LLMs to find a brand, cite a brand, and then drive citations link back to your websites as brands. So this is just some of the stats which kind of reiterates that how critical and how important the answer engines are becoming in our day-to-day life, whether it is for business or consumer, whether it's shopping reasons or whatever reasons, whether it is for B2B or B2C. So ChatGPT, of course, it acquired billion users within the record time compared to any other type of user or a customer acquisition strategy. They have 900 million plus weekly active user. That's a staggering number. You can just think about it, right? And also they have 50 million paid subscribers. That's a phenomenal business model that they've built in a very short span of time. Now, Google was dominant king for decades on SEO, but now it is kind of falling behind, but still it has 2 billion AI overview monthly users. And they also have AI mode, but majority of the people are still 80% stays at AI overview level based on the research what we have seen so far. Another very interesting stat, which I think is most important, that's a biggest takeaway for me, is really the AI referral conversion lift. What this really means, you're all familiar with the organic search or SEM. You provide the Google ad and then you click. So any traffic that you are receiving either from Google Ads or for search engines traditionally, your conversions were in single digits. It's like 1%, 2%. It's like fractional, and you have to invest a lot of money both on the SEO side from ranking up and at the same time in ads. But now, if AI cites your brand and if somebody clicks on the link, the conversion rate is 31%. Just think about it for a minute. You really don't need to spend money on ads anymore. If you really build your AEO strategy strong and fundamentally establish your authority, then you can really win the opportunity with 31% of a conversion lift. That is a huge takeaway for me. And everything should really focus around how do you show up on AI visibility. And that's what we're going to talk about. So another interesting stat, which you are all heard of, zero click, as a name. So organic click-through rates typically used to be around 15%. So that means that if the search results comes, people were clicking if on the links to go to website was around 15%. Now it has dropped to 8% in Google, which means that it is almost 58% reduction in the click-through rate. What this really means? This means your SEO is not working anymore. Your Google Ads is not working anymore because nobody was in clicking. Google is approaching, I mean, you must have observed yourself, it's putting the sponsor ad sometimes above the AI overview results, and below it's playing around by itself, try to figure out its own business model, how to generate the revenue on the ads. But you don't need to spend money on ads anymore because nobody is even clicking it. So that's a 58% staggering reduction in the conversion rate. That's huge. And from a B2C point of view, 80% of the consumers now use LLM, one or the other LLM for any of the research, including shopping. Adobe did a research during the, I don't mention, those who are in the US understand this. In US, 70% of the retail business happens in the last 3 months of the year, which is from Thanksgiving to Christmas time. And according to Adobe, the conversion that happened was almost 30 plus percent of the traffic for the shopping sites came through ChatGPT. That was like a huge shift. So LLMs are influencing big time on both consumer side, and the number is even higher in B2B, because any business company trying to find a tool or a technology or anything that they're shopping, they first go to LLM because they don't have to do the research. They're outsourcing their research job to LLM to get the information they're looking for. So this is the biggest takeaway for me. You don't have to spend money on ads, but you have to really have a solid strategy when it comes to how you show up in AI visibility. So moving on, and Vinay, feel free to stop me if you have any questions
Yeah,
as
I
well.
think one thing that I really wanted to ask you, Anil, is that why is the conversion rate so high when it comes to AI search compared to traditional search?
No, absolutely. See, the most important thing is when the buyer has an intent, right? So they want to buy. And typically when you do qualification, when somebody when downloads a white paper, you have a call, right? So that is mostly you're trying to qualify, like with either a band or some approach that you use, whether they have the budget, reason, etc. But if there is a qualified opportunity exists, then they would have spent lot of time researching themselves, going there, and then they have to not only just research on the web but also talk to you or talk to a bunch of vendors before they figure out. So the process itself is a time consuming process, and it is inefficient, and they may not be even sure despite doing all those things, they might have missed out many of the sites they may not even be aware of. But now the trust factor is so high with LLM, and they're trusting so much that LLM is doing a deep research, and then providing the final ready decision making thing. And my choice is now I know that it has scraped the entire world and told me these are all the top three vendors I have to talk to, and my job has become significantly reduced. That means that if I'm going to that website and researching, that means that I'm already shortlisted. In fact, we say that if you are not cited by LLM, then you are essentially not shortlisted, and then you're just out of the game.
Okay, that's an interesting thing because earlier, so even though I list on the first page, eighth or ninth, I still got some traffic from the search. But tomorrow, even though I might rank on a traditional search, I might just be irrelevant because
Yeah, I will. I have some stats that you'll be surprised to see that I'll show you that about that
sure, I think we can
SEO.
continue this,
Yeah,
Anil.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So now let's understand that how answer engines decide, right? So it's a standard five-step process, irrespective of whichever the LLM it is. But each LLM has their own tactics and the mechanics of how they really generate the answers based on the user questions. And then I have a slide which essentially talks about each one of these five LLMs. But at a high level, it uses these five-step process. First, end user asks a question, and unlike in an SEO world, the end user is typically asking keywords based questions. So essentially one word, two words, maybe long tail keywords with keywords with two to three keywords combined. But now when the users are asking prompts to the question LLMs, they're giving a three four questions combined together. They're giving a lot of context. Like as an example, if I'm looking for a CRM for a mid-sized company, and I'm cost sensitive and for a particular geography in an industry sector, probably I'm trying to squeeze four or five questions together and then ask that question. So which means that it's a complete context, and LLMs have to really break it down into multiple questions and then gather the information, synthesize it, and present it to you. So that is the interpretation. The first job of the LLM is to really understand what's your question, what is the complexity, and if I respond to this, what are the follow-up questions that you would ask so that I can start preparing for that next question. Once you have that interpretation, then it has to decide. So different LLMs have different approach on that one. Some LLMs are already trained, like ChatGPT, for example, uses first the trained knowledge, then it looks into the live search on the web and then synthesizes the information. When you look at Perplexity, it starts with retrieval from the web. They don't have any trained model, though they have their own sonar model, but they use a strategy around running the same query across multiple LLMs, including Claude, Open, ChatGPT, as well as Gemini, and then aggregate and present the results. So they decide on whether they want to use their own trained knowledge or they want to use a retrieval or both of that. Then the third step is fan out. So fan out essentially means, as I said, if your question has three, four sub questions underneath that, both Google and Claude uses a fan out method, which essentially means that it breaks down your questions into four, five sub questions and runs independent queries on the web for each one of those questions. And it collates the responses from those five questions, and then it aggregates this and then present the informations back. So that is a fan out approach that many of the LLMs take. Then the fourth step is, once they have the responses back, they have to corroborate, which essentially means they want to make sure that whatever the brand that they cite, the information is accurate, is being reinforced by multiple sources from a source diversity point of view. And also those sources have a high domain authority so that they're not some unheard of sites or a fake sites, etc. So that collaboration plays a huge role, which is a huge thing. If you think of in an SEO world, you are familiar with the concept of backlinks. And backlinks is you can game the backlinks. There are many agencies just creating backlinks for the sake of creating the backlinks. But now you don't have to do all those things, but you still have to make sure that you have a authority that you build and corroborate, which essentially helps to drive the citations. Then finally, it synthesizes the information, and based on that information, it generates the response and presents it back to you. So the key takeaway for me in this one is that AI answers are assembled. It means that it dynamically fetches the information on the fly, thinks who is an authority in this, and presents the information, generates the response. Unlike in an SEO world where the pages gets ranked, and then whatever the ranked page, it will just serving you as a result set in the SEO response. So that's a key difference here. Moving on to the next slide. Now that we know
So, Anil,
how, yeah, sure,
sorry to cut you
yeah,
off.
yeah.
It's interesting you said that, it works completely different from a traditional search,
Mm-hmm,
right? So if that's the case, that means that, today in the morning,
mm-hmm.
I might be cited for a particular, prompt, and tomorrow I might not be cited for that same particular prompt because
Not at all. Yeah,
everything is happening dynamically.
correct. Correct. Correct.
Oh,
And also the way the Google works is that in case of Google, it looks at multi same queries, it runs on multiple times, and then it has to corroborate you're getting a similar answer. So your answers may be completely different. When it comes to, like, for example, ChatGPT and Claude, they work on a deterministic method. So that means that you have a good chances that you will be reappearing multiple times as well. So that is why we run the prompts on a daily basis, a set of prompts what we identify, so that we have a sustainable authority that you are building as a brand over time, and not just jumping up one day and then disappearing next day. So you want to eliminate that uncertainty.
got it. That's interesting, Anil.
Yeah.
Please continue. Yeah.
Yeah, moving on. So if you look at a high level, this is just a stats because you think of like this, right? Now your top of the funnel leads are coming from LLMs or this AI engines. Even there is no SEO anymore. Even Google is another AI engine. So that means that you should be ranking across all engines, and you should also know at the same time what is the traffic, which LLMs are more critical for you, depending on whether you're B2B, B2C, or you're in a Microsoft ecosystem, or you're a technology company, or are you a consumer product. A lot of those things plays into where people go and gravitate towards which LLM. But end of the day, you have to have a strategy which works across all LLMs. So that is why what we say is that you should not work on optimizing to a particular LLM or LLM by LLM. Instead, you should more focus around building an authority as a topical authority for you as a brand, which caters across multiple LLMs. And just some statistics here is that ChatGPT about, as we talked about, 900 million weekly active users, and then Google AI overview 2 billion users. Copilot is more or less restricted to the Microsoft ecosystem and mostly in the B2B side. B2C, those who are using on the Bing, it uses the response, but I would say that is the probably the lowest when it comes to the market share in terms of ranking or general question and answers related ones. Perplexity has become super, super popular. And the best part with Perplexity is that you don't have to go to three different engines, because Perplexity behind the scene, apart from using its own Sonar LLM, it also uses all other LLMs to synthesize data. In fact, it uses 50 plus documents it generates and then uses that as a source before it starts the citation. So it is the most deepest and then complex response it provides. And authority is super critical when it does. In addition to authority, it also looks for freshness. Is your content recent or not? That plays a huge role for Perplexity as well. In fact, one of the stats what I heard was Perplexity doesn't even look for a content that is more than 3 months old. So that means that you have to be on the content game on a continuous basis. Not that you just publish 2 blogs in a month and just forget about it. That's not going to work anymore. And finally, Claude is becoming, like, when it comes to deep research and logical reasoning, Claude is by far the hands down the best LLM in the market today. And most of the top companies are switching to Claude from ChatGPT. This is just a breakdown, so that way I wanted to give you. We'll share this slide deck with you, and then you can just. I don't want to go detail about this, but I just go on the first line from an architecture point of view. How LLMs work internally behind the scene when it is going and researching the information, retrieving the information. And keep in mind, there are two types of bots. So at the end of the day, LLMs are crawling. They have AI bots crawling, like in an SEO world. Google was crawling, search engine was crawling for everyone's website. Now LLMs are doing the same exact thing. But LLMs has two different types of bots. One is a training bot. So essentially, for the future model these LLMs are releasing, the training bots, they publicly announced it, and everyone knows which is training bot, which is a retrieval bot. So you have to really understand the concept of the difference between these. So training bot mainly intended for answers that are going to be given by the future models, because the training, it gets trained. And also, you must have noticed ChatGPT doesn't give as much of citation as a Perplexity or a Google AI overview provide, simply because it's already trained, it already has the knowledge. And that is why it doesn't provide the citations, and then it is always the trained knowledge first and then the retrieval approach. But I heard that ChatGPT is also changing to more citation driven approach rather than a trained model approach, because there's a lot of data that's coming fresh, whereas the ChatGPT might have been trained 3 months ago and 6 months ago, which may not be even relevant. So that's the reason even they're trying to change their model as well. So as you can see, LLM first is, that means that they use the trained knowledge and then they live retrieve the information and then synthesize it before it generates a response to your prompts. Google AI overview, it first retrieves first, which means that it breaks your query into multiple queries, scrolls the web, finds the answers, then it fuses with its own search. It doesn't use the LLM trained model on Gemini. Instead, it uses SEO search. So if you have an SEO, it may influence to some extent only on Google View. Outside of Google AI overview, your LLM, your SEO doesn't play any role at all, even in Google AI mode as well. Only AI overview uses your SEO. Then Microsoft Copilot, as I talked about, it's behind the scene. It uses LLM, and then it's primarily similar to Google. It uses OpenAI plus its own indexed search result equivalent to SEO model. Perplexity, as I said, it is a search first, and it breaks into multiple questions, sends out the questions to its own model as well as across multiple LLM models, and then it synthesizes the information from the query responses. And finally, Claude is more reasoning first, and then optional research. So there are different factors. As I said, I'm going to share this slide, and probably you can go through this, and then you can understand much better. One thing that you should really consider about this volatility, which is very important in terms of, this is where I talked about it, right? So Google AI overview really makes sure that it runs multiple times the same queries, multiple times, and then it has to get a overlap response where your brand is cited in multiple responses together before it shortlists you to cite. So that's what this volatility means. So um, any questions, Vinay, before we move on to the next slide?
We have some amazing questions in the on the chat.
Mm-hmm.
I will probably bring it up during the Q&A, but I think there was one question relevant to this slide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or generally, which is very interesting. Manjunath is asking, can you share a real example where optimizing for AEO significantly improved brand visibility? So, do you want to name a brand who is consistently working on this, Anil, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, see, we launched our solution about 6 months ago in the market in US. So we are primarily targeting, we are targeting global market, but our current customer base is primarily US focused. So we have many on our website. You can see in Ziply.ai, we have customers like Arango, Nimblework. We have e-commerce companies. We have law firms, medical practices, including dental. So those are all our customer base, large B2B company to early stage technology startups to local SEO type of companies as well. So for example, if I can tell you that we are working very closely with the law firm as an example, and we are helping to build their authority. Some of the things that we surprise ourselves is that majority of these companies like law firms or dental offices, they all use this ready templatized websites. And
Mm,
that is a big negative thing because there is no authority there. It's the same content, logo changed, some words changed, location changed, and these bunch of vendors in the market essentially just copy paste the same template to multiple vendors. And
yeah.
that is the biggest penalization factor for them to not show up at all. And then we work very closely in terms of modernizing their website, auditing and tailoring it specific to the brand, to their particular brand. And then we build the authority. And authority building is not just about producing the content. It involves how you establish your presence in multiple databases. How do you establish your presence on the review sites, whether it's in B2B, G2, or it could be Yelp, it could be Google Business Profile, or Apple, Bing places, bunch of these places, right? And Reddit is becoming a big influence, especially ChatGPT weighs 40% weightage on Reddit. And many companies, many LLMs look for news media articles presence as well. And in fact, LLM use a paid subscription across majority of the media outlets to source the information for ranking purpose, for training their own model as well as live retrieval for responses as well. Yeah, to answer your question, we have seen the needle is moving, but again, as I said, it's just about 6 months. Similar to SEO, you are not going to see the results in a week or in a month's time. It is a sustainable effort is what you need to look. We are seeing that there is a progressing trend, and we track that on a week by week basis and month by month basis. I would say about typically about 90 days to 120 days, you should be start seeing the results if you measure it on a continuous basis. That is our focus. Is when we acquire a customer, we establish a baseline in terms of where do they stand, and then we monitor it on a daily basis, and then we show the trend and on a week basis and monthly basis, and then we have a weekly cadence with the customers to review. And also we identify where the gap is, not only about your own, but how you are performing against your own competitors, because it is no longer people may not be even knowing your brand. So that means that you have to build the authority at the category level. So that means that you have to really outshine your competition. That means that you have to constantly keep monitoring your competition as well. This
Yeah.
can only happen if you do these programs on a daily basis, and then you have a sustained, a disciplined cadence of execution around AI visibility. That is absolutely critical. It is not like SEO anymore.
Thanks, Anil. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I think the biggest takeaway for me on this slide is that don't look at one LLM and optimize your site, or don't look at each LLM and then start doing it, but build your content authority, build your authority that can actually influence all of these LLMs. That's I think if I'm right, is that a right understanding, Anil?
No, absolutely. See, it is good to understand. One has to understand really how these different, especially if you're in marketing department or in technology space, you need to know how these different LLM works from a conceptual point of view. So that way you can plan your content, etc. I mean, I'll tell you one example. We started selling the tool as a tool to many B2B companies and B2C companies. One of the biggest challenge that I realized was these companies have team resources, but they're not cutting edge when it comes to understanding how this LLM works. And eventually they end up blaming the tool. That is when I decided that, at least at this stage in the beginning, we should offer as a managed service thing, because our job 24/7 is to constantly keep track of and monitoring it. LLMs keep changing. They release new models. Similar to SEO, they keep changing their
Yeah.
algorithms. And it becomes our job to improve our own algorithm so that we get the citations for our brand. And at the same time, we also look at outside of the tool, what are the other things we have to do, whether it's a community building, whether it is a media publishing, whether it's a review management, all those things. So this is where for this to be a successful model, it's a combination of an effort and of an agency along with the tool, which is one of the reasons why I'm super excited to partner with Verbinden as well. Yeah, to answer your question, you need both of it.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you so much. I think in the interest of time, let's move
Yeah,
forward
sure.
and we will take all the other questions in the Q&A. Thank you for putting in so many questions. We are really excited on that. Yeah.
Yeah. To extend your question or your takeaway in the previous slide, which is don't optimize for one LLM, which is what this slide essentially is going to talk about. So why brands get surfaced, right? So the most important. So one, you need to build a topical authority. I will talk about in the next slide in depth about what topical authority means for a given brand. But this is essentially you have to identify if you want to give an elevator pitch to a customer saying that, hey, how do you position yourself as a company? You will come up with one line statement like, for example, we say that, we help companies with, get cited by LLMs. That's kind of our one line statement in terms of what's our positioning is. That means that LLM has to internalize, okay, Ziply means it is synonym with helping brands get cited by LLMs. So that's a topical authority that I'm trying to build for Ziply itself and from a brand perspective. So that is how you should think about building an authority. So that means that once LLMs recognize that you are a brand or an authority in that topic area, whether you are selling a graph database or a dental service or a medical equipment or or a e-commerce product, you have to identify what is your niche and what's your specialty, and then you have to establish your own authority around that topic that you want to build authority on. Now the second one is relevance. This is where it is really important, and we use different tactics around this one. Prompt design is the most important aspect that one has to really pay significant attention to. End of the day, you need to have the right topical coverage for your buyer questions. And the way we do it, like for example, it with a B2B scenario, your salespeople having conversation on a daily basis with many of the prospects, customers, your support people having conversations with your customers. That is the best source for you to find out what kind of questions your buyers are asking at the time of prospecting, at the time of buying, in the webinars or in your support tickets or during the sales conversations. Make sure that you have the responses or you have a topical authority built around those questions. Similar things, if you are in a dental industry, or if you are in a law firm or a e-commerce, any of those business, you need to understand constantly, if you have a recording of those conversation, now LLMs are there to easily extract and turn that into prompts. Or that is exactly what we do. We specialize in building those prompt designs specific to customers based on industry, use case, target market, ideal customer profile, or ICP. Based on those things, along with synthesizing their recordings, we come up with a set of prompts. And then prompts are also not that one time you're done and you're done with it. You have to constantly identify, refine those prompts, and then they're like a living documents. You have to improve that on a continuous basis. The relevance of your content and topical authority has to exactly match with what buyers are asking. Otherwise, you're again lose the opportunity. The next one is collaboration. I briefly touched upon in the previous slide. So this is where multiple sources has to corroborate and then reinforce to LLM that you are an authority on whatever the topic that you're trying to build an authority. And that's exactly, it's essentially think of like customers providing you testimonials and ratings, etc. And that's a collaboration by customers who are using your product saying that it's a great product. And that's what LLM believes more than they, trusting just your own word. And freshness, as I mentioned, you have to, this is much more than a content game, and freshness is absolutely critical in this one. You cannot just, produce few, sprinkle the content here and there, and then expect AI to cite. That's not going to work. Semantic clarity. This is where I talked about, right? So it's not only just making sure that your content is very unique and centered around the topical authority that you're trying to build, but at the same time, like for example, Microsoft or Google, they use knowledge graph behind the scene, and that we call it as a semantic graph, knowledge graph. So end of the day, it is the entities and the nodes and edges where you build the relationship, and that is how it trains its model behind the scene. So which means that when these training bot or the retrieval bots crawling your website, you want to really make sure that your content on the website is optimized for these AI bots for crawling. And you may have done, traditionally we also have a mindset that this is a lead magnet. I want to put it behind the gate, get it, form or something like that because you want to generate a lead. But I think that you need to you may still have that strategy, but you should also start thinking about bits and pieces of that lead magnet information. You have to start publishing. End of the day, your audience is the way I whenever I pitch to my customers, I say that hey, your audience is a buyer who used to go read your blog and ebooks and things like that. Now they're not your audience. Your primary audience for your content is essentially LLMs. And you want to make sure that, and LLMs don't care whether you're publishing 100 blogs in a day or one blog in a month. They're content hungry. And but at the same time, you cannot just generate the content from LLM and then publish it because they know that it's their own generated content. So the quality is equally important along with the quantity. You cannot compromise on either of these things. So that is why the freshness plays a big role. And then semantic clarity is another critical thing for it to really understand, make it easier. Even like, one other interesting thing, one big takeaway if you want to understand on how you publish your content, many people are more used to publishing ebooks as a PDF documents. So, and for AI bots, they always even markdown text. LLMs is not great in parsing the markdown, and it's even worse with parsing the documents. Your best bet is to make them HTML content, and LLMs are trained extremely and super fast when it comes to indexing the content, crawling it if it is an HTML tag content. That is where clear titles, headings, entities are absolutely critical. Another thing is that you want to make the content, I mean, listicle, 40% of the responses are listicles. So which means that you want to make sure that you have an FAQ in every page so that bot can understand that, okay, this page answers these type of questions, and it's all structured in a bullet points type of nature. So that way it is more easier for it to respond. Those are all the tactics that you have to use along with your, the keyword stuffing and other things based on the, EAT philosophy that SEO has come up with. And finally, accessibility. This is again, that's exactly the point I said, the crawlable, indexable HTML, technical fundamentals still matters. So this is the conceptually how you can build an authority. If you focus on building these core pillars, you don't have to worry about optimizing for ChatGPT or Google AI, or it automatically handles, because you are building an authority, you are establishing the relevance, you are building the collaboration across multiple sources of high authority, your content is always fresh, your site and content is well structured for crawling, and then it is accessible. So if you make sure that these dimensions are checked, then you're good for across all LLM. So that's a good news. You don't have to worry about optimizing for every LLM. Moving on, AEO is brand system, brand authority system, right? So this is where this we call this as a six pillars. We built our own LLM framework on how we want to show the visibility. So buyer intent, query coverage, I briefly touched upon it. So you have to make sure that your topical authority you're building is essentially centered around your buyer's intent queries. That's absolutely critical because you have to have the right answers to your buyers, whether it's a competitor comparison, whether it's your differentiation, whether it's the case studies that you have built, anything and every our price points, you should have everything very clearly articulated. Topical authority. This is a deep, deep subject because this is where we have a concept of we start with the topic pillar. Think of it's a hub in a spoke, a hub in a wheel, and then we have content cluster. Content clusters are the spokes around it. So typically at a brand level, we recommend anywhere between to 4 to 8 topical authority that you have to identify for a given product line that you want to build as a solid authority for LLMs. And for each topic, typically we say anywhere between to 10 to 12 content clusters, and each content clusters will have micro topics. Micro topics are more like your continuous ongoing publication of your blog, your podcast, your webinars, your social media posts, your ebooks, anything that you do on a day-to-day basis. All of those things has to reinforce one of these clusters, and each one of these clusters in turn reinforce your topical authority. And when you have to make sure that this message is consistent across the web, whether it is on Medium or on Substack or on Reddit or on LinkedIn or on your own blog or anywhere else, if somebody else is citing, you have to make sure that your brand authority is consistent across the place. That's a collaboration. Google plays the biggest attention for that. If you are trying to have disconnected content information, like many people just for the sake of attracting people write blogs about anything and everything, that's not going to help. You have to really focus around what is your authority that you're trying to build, and then build a collaboration around that. So topical authority is that I can have a lecture for about an hour just deep into topical authority itself. Next one is we talked about third party collaboration, and especially citation from review sites like G2 in case of G2 or a Gartner Peer Insights. For B2B or B2C like Yelp or Google Business Profile plays a huge role from a collaboration point of view. Wikipedia, if you get onto Wikipedia, that's golden. In fact, that's the biggest one that can influence you in terms of collaboration. Then semantic clarity and consistency, we talked about freshness and update, and source diversity. So this is where in fact, we were one of the unique tools that where we have built not only helping from AI visibility, but also content production and content distribution. And we, in fact, built an advocacy system where it leverages your employee advocacy as well as your partner advocacy, because that is your captive audience. And you just have to ask them to, you don't, with our tool, you don't have to even ask them. It automatically publishes the content on behalf of them on their social networks, whether it is on Reddit or LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it doesn't matter wherever it is, because that is where you are publishing and building that ubiquitous presence of your brand and authority across the web. And when LLMs goes and crawls multiple sources like these major social media channels, news outlets, etc., then your brand is consistently showing up because your ecosystem is publishing and then proliferating that message that corroborates for LLM. That's a strategy we use. And this is not only just a tool strategy, but also a managed service strategy, that how do you make sure that you constantly on top of it? How, what are the questions, similar questions, being asked on Reddit? And do you have the answer to those questions? Reddit and Core are the best places where you can think of end user prompts, how it is going to be. And then that becomes the input for you to design your topical coverage. So that's a source diversity, which is another critical things to think about. Now, finally, the last thing I just wanted to touch upon, what could be the next 90 days roadmap from an AI visibility point of view? The first step is you want to make sure that the first 30 days diagnosing. So this means that you have to establish your baseline today, that where do you stand on AI visibility, not only for your brand, but at a category level, comparing against your top 5 or top 10 direct competitors. Where do you stand? That baseline establishment is absolutely critical. And then once you know where your gaps are, it tells you two things, right? One, it tells you that how good or how bad you are. And second thing, it tells you that which brands are cited, which sources are citing your brand that LLMs are using, and then which your competitors using. That's a huge insight for you. Now you know that what are the sites that your competitors have showed up, and then you can influence them to publish your content so that LLM already using them as an authoritative source for citations. That's the second insight you get with this intelligence. Then third thing is that we identify based on your gap what are the missing topical coverage that you have, and then we help you come up with this topical discovery. That is where we are building heavy intellectual property in terms of deep understanding how this different LLM works, and that's our responsibility for you to help build those things so you don't have to worry about it. It's a black box for you, but we guarantee that in the next 120 days, your AI visibility start going like a hockey stick rather than staying stagnant or going downwards. That's our promise. Now, once you have this established baseline and then set of prompts identified, then start rebuilding. That means that you have to start thinking about how do you start producing the content in terms of blogs or social media posts, webinars, Wikipedia, all sorts of content formats you can think of. And also videos plays a big role in terms of short videos, particularly on LinkedIn. You cannot ignore social media at all because that is another angle where people are still going to social media and reading it. So if at all you are targeting audience, a human readable audience, that would be your social media angle. If it is a blog or ebooks or anything else, it is LLM is your audience. That's kind of a thumb rule that I always use. And this is where you should think about how do you start strengthening point of view. Not only just producing the content, and then also think about proliferating that content and collaboration. That is the most critical. The insight you identify the sites who are writing about it or who are collaborating with you, how do you influence them? Because that is not going to happen overnight. This is a time consuming activity. You have to have a focused effort around building your influence with the other influencer who are writing about these topics so that they can cite your brand, which LLM in turn uses for your domain, their domain authority. So that strengthening is happens in the second phase of the project. And the third page is where you have to consider this is sustainability. It's not that you show up one day and then you disappear next day. Your goal is to constantly measure on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and make sure that you are going up or down. And if you are going up, why? Going down, why? Then you have to keep continuously course correcting. It's like an autopilot. You get the constant, like in a self-driving cars, is constantly keep getting the signals in terms of what are the other vehicles moving around it, and then it course corrects by itself. It's exactly the same approach that we use in terms of how do we expand it and then measure it on a continuous basis. Once you establish topical authority, then it becomes very solid. Then you still have to maintain it, but at least you are top of the game. It's very important that even the LLM cited responses, they don't even show up in the top 100 SEO ranked sites at all. I mean, top 100 SEO ranked sites don't even show up in LLM. So that means that your SEO, whatever you build, is completely not useful outside of Google itself. Only in Google AI, it still uses because it's own proprietary IP, but otherwise no one uses it. So that's pretty much my slides. So probably Vinay, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer as well as to the audience questions.
Thanks, Anil. I think this is such an amazing session. But one thing that I can tell you, Anil, as in when we go deep, it just becomes too interesting and there is so much to learn.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
1 hour is
Yeah.
really, really short amount of time to learn about AEO and GEO. I think we will take some questions from audience that have put up in the Q&A, Anil. So I think that would be a good use of time for the next 15 minutes. I have Nitin Mathur who has asked, can you please explain more on how to build topical authority?
Yeah, as I mentioned, right, so topical authority is like a first you need to identify a topic pillars, right? So when you say topic pillar, let's say if you are a I work for a graph database company and I'm intimately familiar with how these databases work. If you are in a graph database space and I work for Arango, so then what is the topical authority they have to build? They have to make sure that they essentially help reduce the hallucination for AI. That means that they have a much better contextuality that they can provide compared to a vector database, right? So that is a big differentiator for them. So that means that that would one of their topical authority. You may have a different product lines that you are selling, whether it's a project management software. That means that you want to build an authority on a as a authoritative project management software, like for example, Nimblework or Asana or whatever it is. So you as a brand have to identify like a positioning statement. What are your top four topic pillars that you think that you want to build an authority? You want to let LLM know that, hey, these are the four topics that I want to build my authority, and then you recognize, or you make up your mind, or you get trained as I'm an authority on this topic, this topic, this topic, this topic. When end users are asking the question, those topics are essentially should be able to answer those questions. So now, once you identify the topic, then you have to break down the topic into 10 to 20 different 12 different content clusters. Once you have those content clusters identified, then every ongoing content, like I said, blogs, social media posts, webinars, everything you do has to reinforce back into some of these the content clusters, which in turn reinforces back to topical authorities. Now, when you are proliferating this message, whether it is a blog, reinforcing one of the topic pillars clusters, another thing reinforcing another pillar. When LLM looks at it, it start forming its own mind that, oh, you are an authority, and I see that you are an authority across multiple sources corroborating that. Now I believe you that yes, you are an authority. So that is how you essentially build a topical authority. In fact, we spend a lot of time with the customers just working around topical authority and the prompt design itself. That's our majority of the consulting work, what we do.
Thanks, Anil. I think that's a great explanation. I'm sure Nitin it helped. Uh, there is Dalai who has been asking the question consistently, and I missed taking up that question. Dalai, apologies for that. Let me take your question first. Dalai says, I'm building backlinks for one website, but the backlinks are not increasing. However, when I create the same backlinks for another website, that website backlinks are increasing. Why are the backlinks not increasing for that website? Is there any reason?
Yeah.
So
See, again, backlinks are a SEO concept, right? It's LLMs really doesn't care about backlinks at all. To be very honest and transparent with you, LLMs looks for topical authority and collaboration. If you want to just two takeaways, topical authority and then collaboration. Those are all the two key things that they look. And they don't do any page ranking. Google has an SEO. Google used to have a SEO algorithm, which they don't have anymore, by the way. And they use that backlinks to essentially rank a page. There is no ranking concept with LLM at all, because every query, every prompt, it live fetches the answers across the web as well as its own trained knowledge, depending on which LLM it is, and then it synthesizes the information. It doesn't even look for the the backlinks. It doesn't even care. There's no concept of backlinks in case of LLM. It's a collaboration what really matters. So I don't know why it showed up in one site and not in other sites, but my honest opinion is it's wasting of time trying to build a backlink at this point, at this point in time.
thanks, Anil.
Yeah.
Marcus has a question. Does that mean our blogs help only in SEO and not in AEO?
No, blogs, like I said, blogs are absolutely critical when it comes to AEO. It's the SEO, like I said, if you do AEO, SEO is automatically covered. Because SEO is now a small subsection of AEO. And then SEO is only again used by Google. No one is using it. So even if you think that Google is your primary engine, sure, you can still build the SEO. But if you build it for AEO, then automatically SEO is covered. So think of that you want to build an authority in AEO. So now, as I mentioned, AEO looks for topical authority, which means that you have topic pillars, content clusters, and ongoing content. Your ongoing content is blogs. The content you produce in the blogs has to again reinforce back to your content cluster topical pillars. Keep in mind, all you're trying to do is that you're telling LLM constantly, hey, anything and everything that I'm trying to do is to build an authority on these four topics that I identify as a topic pillar. That means that you want to make sure that your content corroborating yourself or reinforcing yourself that every content you're publishing is one way or the other aligned back to one of the pillars that you want to build an authority on. So blogs are absolutely critical, and you can see repurposing plays a big role. If you have a webinar, turn that into several blogs, and then turn the blogs into multiple infographics or social media posts or articles on Reddit. I mean, you should always start looking at strategies, and also keep in mind today people are fatigued to read blogs and ebooks because the perception is that, oh, people would have used ChatGPT to generate the content. I'm not going to read that. And if they want to find any information, they go to ChatGPT and ask for it because it tells them synthesized information. But where it really matters for even like, for example, yourself, right? Instead of you reading, you're attending a webinar or a podcast, because here the ideas have been discussed and shared, and you get to know not only from what I and Vinay discussed, but also the audience asking questions. You have the similar questions on your on top of your mind. You get the answers. Those kind of an interactivity was you miss in the blogs and other things. So that is why I strongly advise having conversations like webinars and podcasts, and then videos plays a huge role apart from producing the content. Think of blogs and others, is you're producing that content for LLM to demonstrate your authority. Social media post, you're targeting readers to push your message like a teaser information, and then drive them to wherever you want to, whether it's a website or video or something else. And that is the way I look at it, building around the authority. And then blogs are absolutely critical. I'm not saying no.
Thank you, Anil. I also have this good question from Saurabh. He says, hi, for a software development company, how does AU actually help in getting client leads? And what should we do to increase our chances of being recommended by AI search?
Everything I talked about, that's what you have to do. So, I mean,
Thanks, Anil. I think then probably Saurabh, you should be implementing AEO because you need to probably rank for certain services that you would offer. Could be digital transformation, AI transformation. It could be even services like cloud migration. So that's where you need to look at what is that one thing that you want to build your topical authority on, and you want AI to cite you, right? You
and that
cannot
topical
be
authority should be, sorry to interrupt, Vinay. The
sure.
topical authority should be your differentiation. You see, there should be a spin, because every company says that they're doing a digital transformation because it's such a broad topic, and then everyone claims that they are. But what is your niche? What's your differentiation? What is the angle that you are positioning yourself from a topical authority point of view, that is different from your competitor? Because at the end of the day, you are measured at the category level, not you as a brand in an isolation. So that's critical.
Got it. Got it. Thanks, Anil. I think we still have more questions. Do you mind if I extend
Yeah,
this
yeah,
Q&A
sure.
by 5 minutes?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um, I have Akanksha who says, what does GEO, what role does GEO play in driving growth and visibility for a law firm?
Oh, big time. I mean, we have a law firm in Colorado. They have multiple offices, and every law firm has significant competition. In one zip code, there are like dozens of law firms. Now, one of the law firm that we are working with, that they help with the DUI cases and other things, right? So now this is not a problem, that happens, or you cannot plan those things. So now suddenly they need a help. So that means that if there are 10 attorneys or the law firms around it, how do you establish and differentiate yourself as a law firm? One is the price, of course, price always a play role, but in terms of the support, what's your differentiation, and your own experience? And now, from a visibility point of view, how do you make sure that you show up in LLM? Especially, this is more placed into your local SEO concept rather than a national SEO, because you are working in a particular location as a local brand. So in this case, you have to really make sure that you work with your local, from a collaboration point of view, local publications, and listing in like Google Business Profile to Foursquare to NeoStar to a bunch of those databases, because LLM uses those databases, actively participating in Reddit conversations around these kind of things. So those are all the things it plays. And also you should have some kind of local webinars, participation in the communities. So this is how we help our law firm working on these multiple angles, combination of both tool helping with measurement, content production, content distribution, and managed services part, and strategizing those things, working with these different influencers in terms of the collaboration part of it, that essentially help to drive the citations for this particular law brand.
Thanks, Anil. That is very helpful. I also have Marcus asking, should there be any difference in strategy for a service versus product-based organization?
Absolutely right. I mean, see, the way I differentiate is this one. Every business, like for example, the way you design the prompts is much different from a B2B or a B2C point of view. That's a very high level, broad distinction. Now, within a given industry, the focus may be, if you are focused on a particular niche or an industry sector, that means that all your content should be centered around that particular niche or industry, because that's what you are trying to build the authority on. And maybe if it is a local, then you want to build every content you write is about that location or the audience in that location, the demographics at that location. So you really have to understand your ICP, the ideal customer profile, and then based on your buyer persona, you have to design your content. See, everything, end of the day, the decision maker is another human being, and then they have bunch of questions, and you have to analyze your buyer personas and ideal customer profile, the buying segment, and then design your content and build the topical authority around it. So whether it is a product or a services company, all these different dimensions influences on how you design your prompt, how you design your topical coverage, and how you identify the topic pillars and content clusters that you want to build authority around.
Thanks, Anil. I think let's take two more questions before we
Sure.
wrap up this evening. But yes, we would love to have your questions coming in. At the end of this webinar, we will share the email address where you can actually shoot these questions. We will try and respond to these questions methodically as well as with the what do you say, more practical examples that we can. In the interest of time, I'm taking Manjunath's questions. Does structured data our schema markup play a major role in AEO, and how should we implement it effectively?
Yeah. See, I think LLMs, as long as you are compliant with schema.org on your content and make sure that your content is HTML structured, not as a markdown language or not as a PDF documents. You want to make your content searchable easy. And in the robot.txt, make sure that you have you enable scrolling of your website content by both training bot as well as the retrieval bot. So you may question that, hey, why do you want to enable the training bot? It gets trained, but it doesn't citation. But think of it like this: if you are enabling your training bot is getting used to your terminology. Even though it generates its response, it uses your terminology because it's what it's trained on it. So that is one of the way how you have your own touch to your content, and then establish that trained knowledge on LLMs with your own terminologies. That's how you influence on the training bot. So make sure that you enabled it as an allow rather than a disallow for both the training bot and the retrieval bot. So those are all the things that you should consider from implementing. Another important factor is content. You cannot have a boilerplate content that, especially if you are not a specialized company or a technology company, if you are in a law firm type of a situation, or a, real estate, or optometry, or a healthcare, or whatever. Don't try to use the boilerplate content. That's not going to work. That in fact negatively impact your AI visibility.
Thanks, Anil. I think we will take one last question. Uh, Somebody is asking, do you think those brands who will no longer implement geostrategy now might start disappearing from their online presence, let's say in a year or two? That's from Divya Mishra.
Can you repeat the question? I'm not able to follow.
Like, do you think the brands who will not implement geostrategy now
Oh,
might
okay.
start disappearing from
Yeah,
their
see,
online presence, let's say in a year or two?
that's a really great question. See, we can only talk about the stats, right? And the stat says that in B2B, 18, this is a McKinsey or one of the top leading for the research firms stat, 89% of the B2B buyers use LLM for finding the vendors that they want to discuss or talk or engage with. And in case of B2C, 80% of the buyers are using ChatGPT or Perplexity or one of the LLMs for any of their shopping needs, or if they are looking for a school or any of those kind of things, they're using their LLMs or their research tool. So that means that if LLMs doesn't recommend your brand or your tool, then essentially your top of the funnel is not coming from LLM, which is the free tool. You see, it's a small investment. If you do, you don't have to spend a lot of money, and you can easily repurpose your ad spend into this and then build your authority. This helps you big time. As you have seen, that it's a 31% conversion rate compared to like 1%, 2% conversion rate. And on the ads, it's even, I don't know how much, it may be around 5% or less. So to answer your question, your lead generation top of the funnel, if you eliminate LLMs, that means that probably your 80% of the top of the funnel is disappeared. That means that you have the remaining 20% of the top of the funnel. Is that good enough for you to survive? That's the question that you need to do. Or you have to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars to use cold calling or other strategies to build up your top of the funnel lead. That means that you're taking an expensive route rather than a easier route and a low cost route to build your pipeline. And it all the survival of the business purely depends on the business, whether you're able to sell your business and you have the customers who are willing to pay for it. But the everything what we are trying to do is essentially help you with the top of the funnel lead, and then how do you drive them from top of the funnel lead to bottom of the funnel lead, so that way it turns into a business.
Thank you, Anil. One last question, even though there are still questions coming
Yeah.
in. I'm working with a UK-based client home exchange, how can a niche platform like this compete with bigger players like Airbnb in AI search recommendation asked by others? I think this is just, if I rephrase this, right? Like, can still a smaller brand compete with a larger brand who already has a significant brand presence because they're big?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the best time for us. The battlefield is leveled, right? So it is like everyone in the many companies, as I said, who are ranking in the top number one page in SEO, no longer even cited by ChatGPT. Just because you're a big brand in SEO world, that doesn't mean that LLM knows. The advantage where the big brands have, definitely they have an advantage. There is no doubt because they're already cited by Wikipedia. Their collaboration is already there with high domain authority sites and other things. You cannot achieve that overnight. That's next to impossible. Having said that, you equally have an opportunity to come up with specific, like for example, if your home exchange, if you're working on it, you may have unique differentiator which is much different than Airbnb. You may be doing a niche segment you're serving to, or you may have a differentiated service that a mass Airbnb may not be offering. That is what you'll be talking. Then that means that you are focusing on a niche customer base. That means that you have to design your prompt for that specific demography. That's where the buyer persona and ICP kicks in, and you have to make sure that your prompts are designed and your topic coverage is catering to that particular ICP you're targeting. And that differentiation you have to carve out, because you cannot head on compete with the Airbnb. It may be a similar space, but you still have to have your own spin as a topical authority. What's your authority? What's your differentiation? Even if somebody is looking at it, it could be a price differentiation, it could be the service differentiation, it could be customer support, it could be any of those kind of things, right? So that's what you need to really carve out. But to answer your question, actually opportunity is much higher for unknown company to be visible on AI compared to an SEO scenario.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who participated in this workshop today. I think it was an amazing 1 hour where we just touched the high level framework of AEO 101, but I think we will do more. We will have more conversations on the AI search, AI led marketing in the coming weeks and coming months. And thank you for all the participation. Anil, I would like to thank you wholeheartedly for bringing this, the workshop to life. I know there has been a lot of preparation that has gone in. I'm sure even to promote this, getting this, I think the team has put in extraordinary efforts to get people and have this webinar up and running. Thank you, everyone. Anil, do you have anything more to say?
No, and feel free to reach out anytime and then check it out, and happy to provide, if you guys have anything, you can set up a meeting at no cost. We'll just discuss about your specific situations and
Yeah.
how, you can explore, just to learn more about it. And then we will have a series of this kind of webinar, as Vinay mentioned. And Vinay, by the way, thank you for you and your team for organizing this event. It's phenomenal, and I'm really excited. I've been researching this probably for 3 years plus now, in specifically around marketing on AI. So I'm very passionate about it, and I think that we can genuinely help whoever is interested on how we can make them visible on AI, and that's the easiest and low hanging fruit for you to generate your top of another leads at lowest cost.
Thank you, Anil. Thank
Sure.
you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Susan.
everyone.
I saw some amazing comments. Thank you, everyone.